I'm gonna say a very hot take that many of you won't like, but I kinda feel that the StarCraft 2 community has at one point steered in the wrong direction when it comes to a balanced discussion. Every time a StarCraft 2 S-tier tournament concludes and a familiar name leaves the trophy, be it Serral, Classic or Maru, doesn't really matter who, there's always gonna be a Reddit thread with one goal: create an imbalanced narrative. Zerg is OP, some people will cry when Serral wins, or Protoss is now too good, others complain when it's Classic. These sentiments, of course, emotionally charged, but they still oversimplify the intricate dynamics of this game. In my opinion, though, the reality is more complex, and player dominance does not equate to race imbalance. So with this video, I wanna try to dismantle that myth and talk about the balance issues from a slightly different viewpoint. First of all, there is one thing that people seem to always forget. Some players are outliers, not because of the race they play, but due to their unique combination of decision making, skill and psychological discipline. Serral's incredible run that started in 2018 didn't suddenly make Zerg overpowered. Instead, it just marked the emergence of a player with unprecedented consistency and multitasking. I have a strong feeling that if Serral played a different race, the outcome would be pretty much similar. Just take a look at Clem, who casually off-races as Protoss because he dislikes TvT. He beats top players equally as both Terran and Protoss. And as for Serral, even though in my opinion the Zerg race was really slightly stronger in 2018, I still believe that the player's skill is the most important part when it comes to results. And the thing is, you can find a whole lot of examples when, even despite really bad balance, the better player comes on top. Back in 2011, when Zerg late game was clearly OP, MVP would still win multiple S-tier tournaments as Terran. This includes his famous game against Nesty and also some GSL Code S. Speaking of GSL, the very same GSL MVP 1 was already played on a patch that made Zerg so OP in late Wings of Liberty. And yet we had, guess how many Zergs? 0 players in the playoffs. You can say, well, they just didn't have time to figure it out, which is obviously true, but even later that year, when it was already evident that something has to be done about Zerg late game, Zerg still failed to win BlizzCon 2012, which ended in a PvP battle between Parting and Creator. So, even in the worst balanced time for StarCraft 2, the better players were still winning large. If you want more recent examples in Legacy of the Void, sure. My favorite one is when Neep switched from Terran to Protoss and started reigning supreme in almost all WCS events, even though, once again, at that time Zerg race was objectively stronger than it would become later. But Neep still did not allow anyone else to dominate his region, and also Europe, until Serral came. Imagine what it could have been if the balance was in Protoss' favor back in 2017. And these are only 2 examples, but we can get even more if needed, but I kinda think that's enough to prove my point. Another thing is that perfect balance is not just about win rates. The game has dozens of possible build orders and adaptive timings, many of which are still being explored even 15 years post-launch, and this also changes quite a lot with new patches that drop occasionally in this game. It's a big thing because no player plays exactly like the other in this game. Some players like Bly or Haas shine when meta rewards more cheese and risk, while others like Serral enjoy their Zerg late game dominance and they don't really need any early or mid-game gimmicks to dominate. This is true for every player, for every race. This is also probably why we saw a greater variety of champions in past days. Back in How to Do Swarm and Wings of Liberty, the game was much more focused on timing attacks, creative cheeses, all-ins and just overall cheesy playstyles, while nowadays it's much more about macro, late game and multitasking. So back in How to Do Swarm and Wings of Liberty, this would make the game less consistent and even superior players would often lose to cheesy playstyles, like it was multiple times with J-Donk and Stardust. Now it's just difficult for more creative or even experienced players to shine in the current version of StarCraft 2, where it's more important to be young and fast like Clem or Raynor. And since the devs and Balance Council favor macro games a lot more, it's self-evident that those with the best mechanics will stay on top longer, since it's also the skill that takes the most time to master. This is why it's impossible to see Stardust or SOS dominate as they did in How to Do Swarm, because the balance has changed to be more rigid and mechanically demanding. Another thing is that for some reason many people believe that we should have the equal representation of all three races on top, since we have approximately 33% of players playing each respective race. However, when it comes to outliers, it's the moment when stats could just be drastically different. This is easy to see if we take a look at regions with less pro players. For example, Latin America was dominated by the very same player almost throughout all of StarCraft 2 history that was special or major as he was previously known, and no matter what balance patch was active, he was on top. Some countries historically had more talented players of a particular race, and for the last 5 years, for example, in European region, we have way more Protoss players in Grandmaster League because it happened so naturally, and also because many Zerg and Terran players left the game, while many new Protoss players were grinding and practicing really hard to take those spots. And also, amongst the very best players in this game, no one can guarantee that we'll have an equal distribution of skill, and there is still gonna be somebody who is just slightly better, no matter what patch is played. Some players are just more talented, faster, skillful, and so on. And in certain time periods of the game, it could be the case that such players belong to one or two races, while the third one is suffering. To give you an example, many great Zerg players like Snoot, Stefano and some others retired between 2013 and 2017, which left a big gap that was not really fully filled in Europe until Serral came. And somewhat same also happened with Protoss race. For the last couple of years, it had only a few great players like Hero and Classic, while Zest and Stats, arguably two of the greatest Protoss players in history of StarCraft 2, were not playing StarCraft 2. In other words, the point I'm trying to prove here is that Hero might be the greatest Protoss player currently, but it doesn't mean that he's the greatest StarCraft 2 player in the world, or that he is equal with Serral or Maru. The only way to prove it once and forever would be if they just played all three races or just played only mirror matches, which is obviously never going to happen. But the main idea is that while the very 0.0001% can have extremely good players, there's just no guarantee that the very best of each race will be exactly equal skill-wise. To put it in other words, you can have 10 amazing scientists working on a big project, but only one of them would be Albert Einstein, who will coin a completely new theory that will change the world. In StarCraft 2, I kinda feel like this is Serral who is just above everyone else. But in conclusion, in my opinion, the consistent victories of players like Serral, Classic or Maru are a testament to their personal mastery, not a flaw in game's design. I would personally be more concerned about the balance when it comes to the top 500 or top 1000 players, and when it comes to actually enjoying the game, and that's what I talked about in one of my recent videos regarding Zerg race and why it has become more boring to play, even though it still performs well on the pro scene. Anyhow, StarCraft 2 has weathered over a decade of meta shifts, patches and different experiments, yet it still remains one of the most balanced RTS games ever created. And of course, there were some bad spots here and there, but rather than using the victories of extraordinary players as proof of imbalance, we probably should see them for what they are, just proof that mastery still matters in a game of such intricate balance. No patch can nerf brilliance, and no balance complaint should diminish the legacy of players who earned their success through years of sacrifice, discipline and innovation. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. Check out our other videos and my Zerg rant if you are interested. Have a nice day and see you next time.